This morning we have a conversation with Fanya Mambo, Kinuthia, who's our guest this hour. Good morning.
A very good morning to all of us in the studio.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good to have you here.
Good to be here.
Since the last time you came, my friend, things have been happening. Things are boiling, others are saying, etc., is happening. Where did the opposition go? Is there one? And then the courts did a thing. Boom. We had the legal conversation, the legal and justice conversation about this very same thing just an hour ago with Nelson Havey. And then, look, there's a social aspect to it, or, the political aspect to it. Where does all of this happen? And those are some of the conversations we're having with you this morning. You've been very vocal about things having to do with governance. And so having you in the studio this morning is great. But let's welcome you with today's proverb. You'll be interested as to where CT's gone this week. And then you can tell us what you think about the proverb.
Yes, we are in the Republic of... It is the second smallest country in Africa. Continental and outside the continent and in the seas. Second smallest. Okay, continentally, it is the smallest. Do you have an idea which country it is?
Is that Burundi?
Small country, yes, but not the smallest.
Isn't that interesting?
It's in West Africa.
Wow. No, I'm lost.
Do not worry, it is fine. It's such a small country, it is easy for you to get lost. It's called Gambia. The Gambia. Slave of a country. I mean, if you look at it on the map, you really have to look. Surrounded by one country called Senegal, but there's an outlet to the Atlantic Ocean. But they have some really, really interesting proverbs.
Okay. Let's hear. Let's hear this proverb.
Right. Never mind if your nose is ugly, so long as you can breathe through it.
Never mind if your nose is ugly, so long as you can breathe through it. I think it's all about functionality. That sometimes in life, looks don't matter. What matters is functionality. Sometimes you have things that don't look as good, but they function. Like parts of our bodies we wouldn't want to talk about, but they function. You don't even want to look at them. You don't want to know how they look, but they function. So for me, I think my take from that proverb is about functionality.
Okay.
If it works, then it works.
If it works, who cares what it looks like?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are things in the country at the moment that may not be working.
Or we may not want to look at
Or we don't want to look at them.
Yes.
We don't look. If we didn't want to look at them, but they were working, then maybe it would be all right.
Yeah.
But somehow they don't look good and they're not working either. And you've had a word or two about some of those things recently. The many things that have been said, and we want to start from, a lot of the president's words over the last couple of days. Many have called them unpalatable. Some of the declarations made, you yourself have come out and said a number of things about, this vetting of individuals for IDs. Why must it be discriminatory? So there are many things that don't look so good. And on the other side, they don't seem to be functioning either. Let's just do a little bit of an overview before we get into detail. Where are we going at the moment? We have an opposition who now is being called upon to say, take your position because you've been given this golden ticket by the court. But it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Where are we, Fanya?
Thank you very much. I think first and foremost, we need to appreciate that we have a very angry head of state. And he's angry because I remember he went to Isiolo and he said, nyinyi vijana, musijaribu kutisha serikali, tutawasafirisha. We implore him to explain to us what he meant by tutawasafirisha. Because as a country, we are deeply worried when a man who controls the entire police force, the entire army, the entire DCI and all security apparatus tells young people tutawasafirisha. We have not asked to be taken for a trip anywhere. We have not applied for any visa. Our passports are still, some of us don't have passports. Hatutaki kusafiri. So, head of state, we just want to say that we are thoroughly worried and we beseech you to withdraw those words because young people are now moving with a lot of trepidation when they think of kusafirishwa. Because kusafirishwa could mean one of those things, mambo ni matatu.
Bingo.
And we don't want kusafirishwa. So that is one of the things that is worrying Kenyans right now. On the issue of IDs being given, I've always submitted IDs are not queen cakes. They're not those things you just come and give because someone has asked for it. First, they are given to people who are the age of 18. And secondly, they are given to citizens of a republic. Thirdly, they are supposed to be free. Why are we being charged for becoming 18 years old? And not just charged. 1,000 shillings is a lot of money for someone who just attained 18. For those who don't understand, what's happening is you're punishing a parent whose child has just clocked the age of 18 because that 18-year-old has not started working. So the same parent who is going through a lot of economic hardships is being made to pay the 1,000 shillings for an ID. And then in their wisdom or lack thereof, and I believe it's more of the lack of wisdom, they decided to make it, to have an expiry date. So after 3 years, you expire as a citizen. Then you have to renew. If you are 18 years,
There's an expiry date.
yes, they are putting them 3 years. Just check out the new generation IDs. They have an expiry date. And you're supposed to renew your ID.
So question,
Yes.
do birth certificates also expire? Because the natural consequence should be your first document is your birth certificate.
Yes.
So that should also expire.
And I told you that's why it's lack of wisdom. That's why they are doing it. Yeah, I don't know who they consulted. But then now, the fact that your ID has to expire every 3 years is very disadvantageous to a young person. Because if someone is going to live for maybe 70 years, you just need to divide by 3 years and you see how much money a young person will have spent.
Every 3 years.
Every 3 years, just renewing their ID to an administration that does nothing for them. So that's a horrible place to be. And so when he said that, we were worried because I have told people, just walk around and you'll find these young people who sell coffee and kangumu, and we know where they come from. And every time you want to pay them via M-Pesa, they have an M-Pesa number and they have Kenyan names. Then you ask them, how do you get Kenyan names? And yet we know even your Kiswahili sounds like another country I just mentioned earlier in the show. And they tell you we are being registered. We are being registered because 2027 is coming.
Seriously?
And that is, yes.
Hang on. Because this is a serious thing that we say. Essentially, if people are being registered, given Kenyan identification, to be able to participate in an election, that's a serious thing.
I'm already telling people who are interacting with these people. You see, I'm not speaking to foreigners. If this thing was online right now and people start commenting, they'll even give you names. Some will even share M-Pesa messages of people they have paid who are not Kenyans, but they have Kenyan IDs and they have M-Pesa lines and they are receiving money and they are doing business here. We don't hate them because Kenyans are very accommodating. In fact, we are very kind to foreigners who come to this country. I think the only thing we do not want is for them to determine for us who will be our president. So, and I think on the voting days, we shall have to respectfully ask them to just stay at home. Yeah, you cannot determine for us who our president will be. So on the voting day, we tell you, we know you are not a Kenyan. Please don't waste your time coming to the polling station because we don't want fracas, we don't want chaos. Just stay in bed, yeah, stay there and watch the results. Then tomorrow you can continue selling kangumu and chai. Don't even come to sell kangumu to us on that election day. We are fasting because we are fasting from we just want to remove a horrible administration. So yes, that is a sad situation. And I was telling, look at it this way. The people who abducted the chiefs and took them outside of this country will soon cross the border and come and apply for Kenyan IDs.
By virtue of?
Because there's no vetting. They'll just say, I'm Somali Kenyan, I'm Somalia. So how do you distinguish between the two? So if the president scraps the vetting process, it means anybody will cross from that side after having abducted some chiefs, come and get a Kenyan ID. With a Kenyan ID, what does it mean? You can get a Kenyan passport.
Yes, you can.
With a Kenyan passport, it means you can walk to the American embassy and look for a visa to the US. And when you go to the US and abduct chiefs in the US, if they have chiefs there, then you'll have abducted them as a Kenyan and not as a Somali. So we need to be very careful because what will happen is that other countries, Germany, US, France, and all the others, will have a very, very difficult time trying to give visas to our people because they'll be telling our people, how do we know you're Kenyan or you're a Kenyan who has been abducting chiefs and taking them into another country?
Fanya Mambo, first, it is 10 years. That's when it expires. That's the official line. But that notwithstanding, the question I have, because it is, for me, very critical. My relatives living in Bungoma have been going through vetting to get IDs, right? and it's been difficult for them to get it because you have to find certain birth certificates, certain documents, sometimes up to grandfather. So there is the idea.
Does the chief also come in?
Yes, the chief also comes in.
Yes.
And sometimes even your local pastor as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to abduct the chief.
So there's been the thought that so I was born in Nakuru, so I didn't have to go through all that. So there's the thought that it is discriminatory to vet a Kenyan who's living in Bungoma, Mandera, and not vet one who's in Nairobi. So how do we balance that? How do we balance the fact that every Kenyan has a right to access the same services?
No, please go ahead. Finish what you said.
Yes, and then this connection of foreigners and possible rigging in 2027. If you get this Burundians, as it's claimed, Somalians, as it's claimed, how sure are you that when they get to vote, they'll vote for you? Because they already have the nationality they want. What are you going to enforce to ensure they vote the way you want?
But we use this word vetting. What on earth is it?
Well, like I explained, it's the chief knowing news from...
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it, when you say vetting in the northern part of Kenya, not vetting in Busia, vetting in...
Oloitoktok?
Is it the same? Are we talking about the same thing? When you want to apply for passport, it doesn't matter who you are, they always ask for your birth certificate.
Yes.
Is that a vetting process? And when we say, because by the way, this thing that we're talking about, May 1st, 2024 is when the president announced this thing. We're in 2025.
Yes.
So it was announced before, last year.
True.
Now, the question I'm asking is, when he says abolishing, what exactly is being abolished?
So you don't have to go through the litany of questions, I would assume. And
But there is nothing that happens. Even if you go and open an account today and you have an ID, the questions are always asked.
All right,
call it vetting, call it verification.
Allow me to ask the question, because the three of you gentlemen, obviously, you have an ID, a Kenyan ID, right?
Yes.
When you were going to get your ID at 18 or whatever, what were you asked in order for you to be given the documentation? What are you asked? Are you asking any questions?
Okay, let me explain this, and it has always been very clear. Every person who's applied for a Kenyan ID has had to bring the ID of their parent.
Yes.
And every person who's brought the ID of their parent has not been asked further questions.
So once you present your parents' ID,
Yes.
they say, okay, thank you very much, come after whatever to pick up
The
your
bulk of these people who are complaining are people who do not have access to their parents' IDs. And the reasons they don't have their parents' IDs is primarily because their parents may not have been Kenyan. But for anybody whose parent is Kenyan, when you come and you're even in Busia at the border and you come with your father and mother's ID, they usually give you that because they ask you for a birth certificate, and some things are common sense. The problem we are having is that there are human beings who claim to have lived and been born in this country. You don't have a birth certificate. No primary school has got a trace of your name. You don't even have an admission number in any primary school anywhere in the vicinity of Kenya. You've not been to a Kenyan high school. Then how are you a Kenyan? How are you a Kenyan? Because your parents are not Kenyans. You are speaking English. You've not been up to a primary school in Kenya. You can't even name the one teacher from your school. I think vetting only comes when questions arise.
Okay,
Because-
so in this case, what we are saying is that question of bringing your parents' documentation then has been removed, essentially. So what we're saying, with the pronouncement that was made in May 2024, and then with the revisiting of the same when the president was in Northeastern just a few days ago, is that essentially that question of bringing your parents' ID, if you want to get your own ID, then now has been removed. Is it not?
I don't know what it means for Kenya Kwanza, because anything goes with this administration. So it could mean anything. It could even mean you can walk.
It means that you can walk up to the door and say, I need a Kenyan ID, and then they'll say, are you Kenyan? Then you say yes. Then you'll be given an ID.
It could mean anything.
Okay.
And then the only thing is that nations that are governed the right way they protect their national documents. They don't just give you a national ID. They don't give you a passport because you asked for one, and they don't give you a birth certificate because you asked for one. So I think that should not have been made on a roadside declaration. It should have been a clear policy directive explaining every step of it, and it should have been disseminated to the public. When you make a public declaration on top of a Land Cruiser like that, what it does is that it gives room for too much imagination and too much speculation, and that's what's going on.
You know, there is a reality here that we must face. Right from the 60s, when we had the shift uprising, there was the idea of secession that was brought about by our fellow Kenyans who live in that part of the country, northeastern Kenya. The verification or the vetting process was actually discriminatory. If you know exactly what was required, people who were Kenyans but of Somali origin even had an alternate card, ID card. The truth is they were not treated like other Kenyans. Even if you are a Kenyan, they were not. Now, when in 2024 that announcement is made, then I have to ask the question. So we are saying that over all this period of time, what has been normal for other Kenyans to get an ID has not been normal for them. Because the requirement of your father's ID or parents' ID is normal, or a birth certificate. If you don't have it, that's when they go to school and say, which school did you go to?
Exactly.
Or which church did you go to? Somebody has to verify that you actually ask who you say you are.
Which is why I'm saying that we must be careful here, because I needed to clarify that when we're saying that all vetting parameters have been removed, is that actually what was said by the president?
Thank you.
Did he actually say that we are removing vetting parameters for our brothers and sisters in northeastern Kenya?
And if we're removing them, what about the other Kenyans who have to provide whatever?
Who still have to go through vetting.
Yes.
Is that what was actually said? And I think we need to clarify that.
For something which has such security implications like an ID, because with that ID,
you can do anything.
So it's not just our brothers and sisters from northeastern Kenya, the whole country. How do you remove the vetting process? Why? How?
You know, this question is difficult, CT, and the difficulty is this, that once again, and this was your Dear Mr. President last week on Friday, once again, we are talking about vetting and its removal, and we don't know what is being removed.
Yes, we don't. We don't. So, Fanya Mambo said it correctly. You can just figure out what you think it means,
yes,
and then apply what you think it means.
Because...
Yes.
But prior to that announcement of 1st May 2024, this problem of registering people who are non-Kenyans and giving them IDs and passports, this has happened.
Yes.
It happened in the Kibaki era.
Post 2007, the Nusumkate government. This is true.
Happened.
Yes.
And it happened alarmingly.
Yes.
Okay? But at that point in time, you would speak and then it sort of like vanished. Okay? Now, a lot of the problems that we now have with cross-border crossing, especially from the northeastern province, it is said that those are the things that have made it impossible for us to secure our borders, because somebody has the documentation that indicates they're a Kenyan.
Yes.
So they can come in and go out. But then even as that is said, you have to pause and ask the question. So if we know that was a problem,
yes,
why then do you now appear to be making a statement that puts us in even greater problems? Because the vetting and the increase of it was because the moment our forces crossed the border and went to Somali, we invited a problem we didn't have.
Yes, and you know, it is so critical, Fanya Mambo, and you're a lawyer as well. Every country guarantees the right to identification. I think it's part of international law or something, that you're guaranteed to be identified. It is a human right. But every country also has a process by which you get to be identified by that country. So could you tell us what is the legal best practice and how should we move forward? You know, if we are to hold the government to account, what standard should that be?
I think first and foremost, for us to be able to hold the government to account is to tell the head of state, please come out of Land Cruiser tops and go back to your office. Because policy decisions are supposed to be made in the office. When you come on top of a Land Cruiser top and make such a far-reaching statement, what it does is that it creates room for a lot of noise. I wish this was happening at the Ministry of Immigration, where technocrats and people who have thought it through sit down and put in bullet form and present it even on the daily newspapers. And it comes out on news and says, this is the policy direction. And you highlight in bullet form that this is what you shall be going through when you're getting an ID. And that is better because even it creates room for discourse. And it also creates room for public participation because they can say this is the draft policy that the government has come up with regulating the issue of IDs. And then Kenyans would probably have had a few town hall meetings and made their contributions. And then that document would have been used as a guideline. What we have now is a public declaration made on top of a Land Cruiser.
What did he say, Fanya Mambo? What did he say?
He said those things that would have made people clap for him, and that's what he wanted because he was in Northeastern, and what was biting the people of Northeastern the most was the issue of how do they get identification cards and so on and so forth. So sometimes the head of states moves to places and tells them things that he thinks work for that region, but he doesn't look at it as something that affects the whole nation at large.
Let's clarify for the purposes of this discussion. I think it's extremely important. What did he say on that day? What did he say that then got all this everybody riled up? What did he say?
What I picked up from him, he was saying you are scrapping the vetting of the issuance of IDs to you people. Because he was trying to tell the people of Northeastern that they have been going through a discriminatory process of getting IDs. But when he said that, there is usually a lot of room within which that happens. And there are reasons why that happens and why it happens and when it happens. When you say it that way, that's when I said again, the president needs to start working from his office, is it creates room for imagination.
Sure.
And a lot of speculation. And people can say anything and do anything about it. Policy statements are not supposed to be communicated that way.
Indeed.
And that's why we have a problem. So now it's going to be everybody making their own interpretation. What will stop me now from going to a chief and saying, President alisema tu mtu akiitisha idea pewe. Mbona nyinyi mnatusumbua? That statement is very amorphous.
Yes,
it has
but
got
actually,
the capacity to mutate into anything.
Actually, he said more than that. He said more than that.
Yes.
When he concluded, he said that whatever is applicable to the people of Northeastern Province must be applicable to every other Kenyan. He also said that that region had been discriminated against for the last 60 years. It's that last bit that I caught, that whatever is applicable to the people of Northeastern Province must be applicable to everybody. Now, when I weigh that against the focus we've given on the removal of vetting, can you actually say that he was saying that you have scrapped vetting altogether?
And that's where the confusion comes in. And I think that's where it would require the policy discussion, where you're sitting at the table saying, if in case of A, then B applies. If in case of B, then C applies. And it's very necessary to do something like that.
The ambiguity comes from this statement.
Yeah.
He removed extra vetting, right? Now, that term extra vetting is also not clear. So, for example, let's say you take a street kid from Nairobi, right? Doesn't know his parents, lost contact many years ago, does not have parents' ID, does not even remember their names, and is looking for an ID, right? By practice, let me not say law because I don't know exactly the details of the law. By practice, that child will undergo extra vetting. They'll try to find a background by which to identify.
They'll try to connect the dots. Yeah.
So when you say you've removed extra vetting, it does not clarify what exactly it is that is being removed, because at the end of the day, every government has to find a way of verifying what's the difference between Okoh and Bichachi. Right? What is Ndu's status in Kenya? What is Bichachi's status in Kenya? So the political question becomes, Fanya Mambo, you've alluded that this is to rig in 2027. Please connect the dots for us.
Okay, first and foremost, there's already a declaration that the census results of 2019
yes.
need to be repeated, but in specific
areas. Yes.
For as far as we are concerned, census is always done every 10 years.
Yes.
What is so hard in waiting for 4 years for 2029? If the census results are just results, because you see, number one, why do you want that counting of people to happen before 2027? Is because there's an intention to declare that there are more people in specific regions than we actually think there are. And therefore, if election results for that place show that there are more people, then there's no question to be raised. I think the most sensible way to have done it is to say, I have not seen people who have been denied voters' cards. I have not seen people who are complaining. Just go to Northeastern, and anybody who has an ID, give them a voter's card. And then if IEBC concludes that there are 50 million voters in Northeastern, they have all been given voters' cards. But when you start by the idea of trying to first declare that the population is higher, because that's what they want to do, what you're trying to do is to start preparing now people for the general election and to tell them, look here, before we go into the general election, we've just discovered a new Tharaka Nithi called the Northeastern Province that has got the capacity to swing votes and change how election results happen. I think in all fairness, let us wait for 2029. If already we have problems with budgetary constraints, we can't even constitute IBC in time to do boundary review. Why do we want to get money to be able to where are we getting money from for counting people? Why don't we take it to free primary education and so on and so forth?
So
the allocation of resources right now to count people is a useless process. And why should it happen before 2027? We can wait for 2029. It's just 2 years after that. But in the meantime, what we need to do is the democratic right to have a voter's card cannot be taken away. So anybody who is 18 and who applies for a voter's card, let them be given a voter's card.
To be able to vote from anywhere they can or should want in the country.
Yes. But this nonsense of counting people right now is a bad idea.
Fanya Mambo, Kinuthia is our guest this hour, and we're looking at a number of things that are happening in the country at the same time. And the question is, so then, after that, what next? So many conversations bubbling at the same time. We're looking at the headlines and listening to, some of the proclamations made by, government. And I said, you know what? The lines upon which we cross these things can be very dangerous ones. They can be dangerous ones when we look at what conflict is made of, So should we be having those conversations? Should we be pointing ourselves in the direction that will bring some kind of division? And then also listening to the sentiments of the president in the last couple of days. More importantly, what we hear coming out of the courts recently, whereby there is an opposition or there is no opposition, whereby we say government is one big dinosaur and we are going to have to, deal with it like that. But when we talk about the need to have citizen-centric governance, talking about some of the things that you talk about, Fanya Mambo, how do we navigate these waters from your point of view?
I think I like the declaration from the courts. I was privy to the petition that was filed by a very good friend of mine, Advocate Kibe Mungai, and that was the case that has had a declaration saying that Azimio is the majority. But I can tell you, no right-thinking judge would have given a different ruling. The case was so straightforward. It's a question of how many parties went into this election under Azimio and how many parties went into this under Kenya Kwanza administration. Then how many members of parliament, Senate and so on and so forth were elected on the various coalitions. It was so simple, so straightforward that any judge who would have ruled otherwise would have been within McNaughton rules. So,
who is McNaughton and why do they have rules?
McNaughton. It's a legal way of saying someone who is not sin.
A few eggs short of a dozen, huh?
Yeah,
okay.
A few eggs short of a dozen, yes. So someone who is not sin. In Kikuyu, they say, for example, if it is something that was boiling, the way you boil githeri, you boil.
Yeah.
There was one last boil that didn't happen.
Kuchemka.
Yeah, so basically it was a straightforward case. Unfortunately, the ruling is coming at a time when, and by the way, the people who really delayed this ruling was Kenya Kwanza man's administration, because they really tried to fight. They were hoping it would go all the way to 4 years. Kimani Ichung'wah, thank you for withdrawing the name Leader of Majority immediately from all your socials. If you go to his socials, he has already removed Leader of Majority. Yes, he has. He has removed from all his socials because he's not Leader of Majority anymore. So he's now Kimani Ichung'wah, Honorable MP for Kikuyu. And so we are looking forward to seeing Azimio come back together and start saying, hey, where did we
You know
leave
what you've
this?
just said?
Yes.
You've just said that Kimani Ichung'wah all along knew he was not leader of the.
No, he knew. He knew. Even from his heart, he knew. It is simple maths. You know,
Why?
you
Just
do
waiting
maths.
for the courts to come
You
out
do
and
class
say
8
it?
maths.
Why?
Because, you see, sometimes in Kenya we do things because we can. You take away from people because you can. And then you think about morals later. Now it's coming back to bite them. And it's a shameful place to be.
We're in the place whereby somebody's going to wait for somebody else to come and declare, you know, and say that,
and
you know,
I think we need
how should we
to
deal?
tell Wetangula to make Kimani Ichung'wah return all the benefits he has gained for those 2 years. For occupying a seat he should never have occupied for those 2 years. But now the person who would have occupied that seat is Opiyo Wandayi, who is already in government and who has actually forsaken an elective seat. Who also forsakes an elective seat to become a cabinet secretary who can be fired at the will of the president? I don't know where some of this wisdom comes from, but anyway, each to their own.
Have you heard of the word expediency? Yes, you have. Now,
Yes.
expediency and what you call common sense may not necessarily sit at the same table and agree.
Yes.
But it takes precedence when somebody understands what it is they hope to gain from it. Now, whether it will last is a completely different matter.
Yes.
But at the time that decision is made, it is clear that one can see some benefit. Now, whether it turns around and it becomes green and moldy, when it does, it will be dealt with then. That is the same attitude that I believe we have witnessed with regards to Uhuru Kenyatta, William Ruto, disregarding court orders as though they were simply suggestions. Those things come now to bite because there is a rule of law and there is a constitution. It may have taken time, but then, as we say, here we are.
Yeah, but CT, you forget that that MP position he left still lies vacant. There's been no by-election.
It's
Right?
no IBC.
Yes. So for him, if he's fired, there's nothing that stops him from running again, my friend.
Until they bring IBC.
Yeah, but you know that until, my friend, they've started selection process.
No, my friend, that's where you go wrong. IBC was selected a long time ago. What we were fighting about is the selection panel to come and select IBC, which had been pre-selected in the minds of those people who pre-select IBC. Let me tell you, there's no way you will come and create fights. The reason we were fighting, actually, we were not fighting about IBC. You will see, there will be no acrimony about IBC. We were fighting about the selection panel because we couldn't agree on the selection panel. Otherwise, from where I sit, IBC was constituted a long time ago. And politicians don't like surprises. There's no way they'll allow such an important process to be controlled by the people they cannot control. So this process, this selection panel was coming to sanitize what they have pre-selected.
If I'm to believe what you're saying, then they have learned nothing.
No,
Why I'm saying they have learned nothing. Because, look, every time when we moved from the Election Commission of Kenya to IEBC, when we then decided that it's political parties who will choose individuals to represent us, the understanding is exactly what you've said.
Yes.
But has it worked that way?
For them, they don't care. You see what happens, and I wish to advise anybody who will appear before that panel to make sure that when you go even for for parliament, when you go for vetting, just make sure you're number last. Our politicians have a way of picking the last two and presenting those names to the president. If you score very highly, you definitely don't stand a chance. If I was to be selected for IBC commission, I would make sure that in the interview I'm number last. Somebody who has got 50% has a very high chance of becoming the chairman.
Why?
Of
Because 50%.
Because you need to look at what Chebukati did. Chebukati was not the best. When they were selecting, they chose the last two. Those were the names that were presented to the president because there was this belief that some of the scores that make you number one is they look at your integrity. They look at so many things, your character, your inability to be compromised, and you become number one. Yeah. So I just need to go to the interview and say I can be compromised a bit. I can be a person of low integrity. Then my name will be forwarded to the president for appointment.
That the immediate former chairman of the IBC didn't have integrity?
No, I'm not saying he didn't have integrity, but I'm saying even if you ask ask him, and if you check the results, he was not the first, he was not the second, he was not the third. He was amongst the last ones there.
What I'm hinting at is perhaps those questions are a ruse. What they're looking for is not just what you're saying. Someone needs to have demonstrated exactly what you're saying, meaning it is known. So even as you're brought before the panel, it is known that this is the sort of person who is passing the exam we did not set.
Yes.
That's exactly what we need.
You're right. From all angles, you're very right.
I mean, look, where we are talking, of course, we're sitting here and we're speculating on different matters, isn't it? But that, sadly, the thing about speculation is that if you do not have a proper and soundproof explanation, or at least people to be able to see things in reality, then you leave room for speculation. Something is going to fill the empty hole, isn't it? So with all of that into consideration, we are at a point where we speculate, but sometimes we kind of sit with our hands crossed across our chest, isn't it? And that you're not really sure what to do. And the whole idea of citizen-centered governance is that you take a position and you say something must be done. We are sitting at the something must be done stage, and is the outcry of people enough at this point from where you sit?
I'll say Kenyans have done pretty well. You see, they have the hard work of working very many hours to fix a meal and just to put food on the table. And then the little time that is left is for chasing this administration and getting to correct them for where they did wrong. This administration has kept us so busy. Where before you're done with SHA, there's airport. Before you're done with that, there's finance. And they have a menu of all bad things that they keep throwing at us, and we have to keep fighting back at them. So Kenyans have done well, given that they also have to work for 16 hours just to be able to fix a meal. Kenyans have done really, really, really well. In fact, and then there's a lot of energy that goes into trying to correct this administration. I think what we need to do first is to forgive everybody who voted for this administration, because sometimes we carry them with our hearts and we wish we could beat them but many of them are sorry and they have apologized. So when you see one of them, just forgive them. Maybe that's one of the reasons that Kenyans are heavily burdened, because and what worries me deeply is that those who voted for William Ruto still have votes in their pocket. So I am really worried about what other decision they might land us into. So let's just keep praying for the country.
Fanya Mambo, there's a Kenyan who's having a watershed week, a Rubicon week this week. He goes by the name of Raila Amolo Odinga. AUC chair potential. Yes. Baba Sirkal.
I think first and foremost, I wish him well. And I've always said, let us wish him well. You know, the problem I'm having is I'm seeing so many Kenyans who have a lot of anger and bitterness towards Raila's candidature, and they are saying they don't want him to win for all their funny reasons. And I keep telling Kenyans, kama we ukuli panya, kwa nini unaona shida paka akikula panya na akiacha utakula hiyo panya? You don't eat rat, you're not going to eat the rat, and you have a problem with the cat eating the rat.
Yes.
If today I offered myself for AUC, they would laugh at me. They would ask me, Fanya Mambo, who are you? What have you done? Well, I am not qualified to. The fact that Raila Amolo Odinga stands a chance at AUC, let us not be those people who have a problem watching the cat eating the rat and beating it because it's eating a rat, and you're not going to eat that rat. Let's give Baba his chance. If he wins, we wish him well as a Kenyan. If he doesn't win, Kenya is still home. Arudi tu bado ataendelea na what he was doing here. But what I want us to take away is that jealousy of not wanting someone to get something that you yourself cannot get, and that you yourself would not do anything about with. Yeah. Let's just wish him well. Let's just pray that he wins, because that's his dream and he's a Kenyan. If he does win, well and good. If he doesn't win, well and good. But hii maneno ya kukasirika because paka imekula panya na huwezi kula hiyo panya, that's not good.
Well, I just wanted to say that, I mean, I'm looking at Kimani Ichung'wah's X, and he still actually listed himself as the leader of majority in the National Assembly, the 13th Parliament. So he's still there.
Look at his Facebook page.
Or should we go to his Facebook? And that before that was
maybe he doesn't know the procedure of removing that on the X page. Still struggling. Needs a Gen Z to assist him.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so on his other socials, it's no longer there.
It's not there.
Okay, it will be interesting to see what the next couple of days. City, I know you had a question.
No, the thing is, Fanya Mambo says many Kenyans are angry. But there are very good reasons to be angry if you ask them.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are not angry at someone. They just need to find someone to direct their anger at. Okay? The political stage that we as Kenyans exist in, unfortunately, has not changed much with regards to how we respond to the processes of electing our leaders and whom we like or whom we don't like. Now, one of the things that this particular government has afforded us, inadvertently, of course, is an opportunity to actually look at the way we do things political in this country. It has afforded us an extremely good opportunity. Now, whether we're going to take advantage of that opportunity, as I say, time will tell. Because the question, in the absence of the government and all the ills that we lay at its feet, do you really think if it wasn't the way it is that we would be having these very vibrant discussions we keep having about issues?
You know, we can have vibrant discussions about how the government has done so well and how it can do better. Those are conversations we could have anyway. But we are not having them because we have an administration that once it's in office, like now there's a finance bill coming. And their deepest worry is, now this time around, we can't raid city Muga's pay slip anymore.
He's awake.
Yeah, because now he's awake. We've not had a government that was saying, hey, we earned 10 shillings from tourism. How do we make it 15? We've earned 11 shillings from coffee. How do we make it 35 shillings? We've not had administration that runs Kenya as a business or that runs Kenya as a going concern. It's always about the pay slip. It's always about traditional places from where they've gotten money. Governments that have brains are having conversations around, wait a minute, how much does Kenya get from selling her flowers in horticulture? And what can we do, for example, so that Kenya begins to make more money from horticulture, then we don't have to tax Kenyans more? I'll tell you a very simple example. Why is animal feeds expensive in this country? It's expensive because to make animal feeds, you need protein. What's the richest source of protein that they use to make animal feeds? It is soya. Then you go and ask yourself, what is soya? Soya is a bean. It takes 3 months to grow. Kenya imports 140,000 metric tons of soya against a demand of 150,000, which means Kenya only produces 10,000 metric tons of soya. Now, I think in government would have said, wait a minute, what is soya? It's a bean. Why are we importing 140,000 metric tons of soya? And we have a minister for agriculture. Then the question becomes, and by the way, just multiply 140,000 metric by 100 shillings per kg of soya. Then you'll see why our animal feeds is expensive. We spend billions of money just importing a bean. And so,
which we can grow here.
Which we can grow here. So we don't have a government in place. We have people occupying spaces of leadership, but they are not leaders.
Is there a time in this country when we've had a government that understood this simple principle of the soya and implemented it?
No. I actually happened to have sat on Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency. And one of the things that I know for a fact, that the intelligence and IQ of the Kenyan civil servant is without fault. I met some of the smartest people that actually think about these things. The problem is we have politicized and infiltrated corruption into the decision making of our country. So between the civil servant and the president, in between there, between PS, CS, president, there's a lot of corruption and interest that then overtakes the very clear, crystal clear thinking of our civil servants.
Look, I think these are conversations that I keep saying it, the conversations that we need to keep having in terms of, bringing our input into a lot of these issues around. Thank you for being here this morning, Fanya Mambo. Again, to have you here again, it would be a good thing so that we can continue to talk about these things and keep them front and center. Thanks for being in the hot seat.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.